Well, here we finally are. The proverbial dust has finally settled, and after many years of waiting and praying to any god that'll listen, a new Dead Space game has finally arrived in all its glory to a flurry of mixed opinions and baffling reviews.
What the hell?
But a majority of fans and critics seem to really enjoy revisiting the franchise.
Great success!
Though a lot of the criticisms towards the game have their merits, and a lot of the problems people have with the game are completely valid. But before all this, many including myself feared the worst of the Dead Space franchise would always lay dead among the endless pile of discarded EA IPs.
I've got nothing left!
No, but like any good necromorph, it wasn't truly dead. And with the Callisto Protocol releasing just a few months before, the survival space horror hype train began.
Oh my god! Okay, it's happening! Everybody stay calm!
And even though I'd played the original games more than I've probably had sex, I was actually more excited to get my hands on the Callisto Protocol. A brand new survival horror IP from some of the original creators of Dead Space. Me and the rest of the internet were completely on board this train. And with that, the anticipation for both games was palpable. Fans eagerly awaited any new information on either game, with people salivating over each new piece of info.
I need it!
Then, disaster struck the hype train. The reviews for the Callisto Protocol started to pile into a mediocre response,
It sucks! Blame the shit!
with fans feeling that the game barely stumbled across the finishing line, and with that, hopes began to plummet for Dead Space. But finally, on January 27, 2023, our French-Canadian saviors from EA Motive delivered the goods that many had been craving for so very long.
It was perfect.
Now, is it a completely new game that will reinvigorate games as we know it? No, not at all. But is it a refreshing breath of fresh air among the stagnant battle royales and repetitive multiplayers?
Yes.
In my opinion, the game is an impressive feat by Motive, able to recreate what made the first game so special, while staying true to the original's philosophy, implementing visually stunning graphics, and combining new and old mechanics to engage players, but more importantly, to not only acknowledge the fan base, but actively listening to the community and their feedback. But, just like my life, it's occasionally frustrating, unintentionally amusing, and sometimes completely fucked.
You ain't lying.
So even though I'm late to the party, I wanted to take my time and savor the game. So in this video, let's take a deep dive into what made this remake so damn good. Oh, and of course, major spoiler warning for this game from this point on.
Okay, let's go.
Many will remember the Dead Space story, but for those who don't, here's a quick refresher. Okay, so our story begins with our titular protagonist, Isaac Clarke, a working class engineer aboard a repair vessel responding to a distress signal upon a massive planet cracker mining ship, the USG Ishimura. And just like any other average working Joe, he's lost the woman he loves, lost his family, and working just to pay his bills. Upon arrival, strange monsters attack the crew, and just like any good night out on the town, everyone is split up and one person is dead.
I don't like where this is going.
Fighting back against the reanimated corpses of the Ishimura's crew called necromorphs that would only truly make John Carpenter proud.
Gotta be fucking kidding.
These Lovecraft monstrosities are created by an alien or not so alien artifact called the Marker, and just like any good sinister space rock, this thing is really out to fuck up your shit.
I'll get you, bitch.
From here, Isaac and the rest of the mystery gang must work together to survive, fixing the equipment and escape the cosmic horror while making friends all along the way. Now, if this premise sounds a bit too familiar, well, you'd be correct. EA Motive has beautifully recreated the original story while also adding their own flavor to help connect the lore to the other Dead Space games and media, fleshing out characters and their motives from the original, learning that Isaac's history with Unitology, the cult-like religion, mirroring a very similar one from real life, goes back further than anyone once thought. Through new side quests, we even learn that the chief medical expert in Isaac's now ex, Nicole, had once helped people leave Unitology, discovering that Isaac met Nicole through his mom, a Unitologist who had been receiving help from Nicole to leave the cult. only to find out later that Isaac's mom has fully gone bananas, killing his dad and herself. Naturally, Isaac isn't too pleased with Nicole, and they civilly end their relationship.
Go to hell, Isaac.
Later, showing just how Isaac is struggling to come to terms with what was said. Now, giving us a bit more context to the video Isaac is watching from the opening, hoping to find Nicole and repair his broken relationship. Because he's an engineer, yeah, okay. And apart from these new additions, the story beats remain almost identical, besides the big twist about that Nicole's apparition is now Dr. Cross, which really doesn't add or deduct much, so I guess? I mean, I can see the idea behind it, but the execution just left me a bit confused why it was changed. However, the game attempts to give a lot more depth to the supporting characters to varying degrees of success. Hammond in the original, a once stoic, stern commander of the Kellyan crew, but has now resorted to being a confused, more timid version in the remake, which I think works quite well with Isaac now taking up the mantle of the leader role now that he can actually talk. So now, Hammond crawls and vents and misses his best friend Chen. Aww. And just like in the original, Daniels is an undercover EarthGov covert agent.
I'm a slithery little sneaky snake.
Blending in as a CEC operative to cover up the marker and its chaos. However, this time the same twist that she's been using you the whole time for her own agenda is blatantly given away, as her dialogue is about as subtle as an earthquake.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
With every piece of dialogue constantly questioning Hammond at every turn, and not to mention being fucking annoying.
Fuck you, bitch! Shut the fuck up!
But not all the supporting characters received the same treatment though, with Nicole's backstory being the standout role here. Learning about her trials and tribulations to help combat the infection during the initial outbreak. She actually acts like a senior medical personnel and just not some damsel in distress like in the original. Dr. Mercer returns as one of the main human antagonists, still up to no good being the token religious bad guy aboard the Ishimura, constantly sabotaging Isaac's plan like a true mustache-twirling villain. All while trying to bring upon the humanity-destroying convergence event, where you're not really sure if he's so devout that he would do anything for the marker or if he really just has lost all his marbles. But he really brings a sinister presence to the insanity and really chews up every scene he's in. The character to fall flat in the remake though, unfortunately, is the crazy Dr. Kine. Before in the original he was just a twitchy, nervous wreck succumbing to the length of his exposure to the artifact, while trying to do the right thing and cure the madness, or so he thinks. But somehow a man plagued with constant hallucinations has become more of a voice of reason with a calm disposition who seems more like a new arrival to the ship than an unstable man on the brink of insanity. The worst part about it is that he could have been the most interesting. He's a man of faith and also a scientist, where Motive could have explored this unorthodox duality, but instead he just gets shot by a ghost. They do briefly toy around with the idea that not all unitologists are these lunatics ready to let a vagina monster stab them in the head, which could have been a unique take with some of the struggling to come to terms with their uncorrupt religion. Maybe it got pushed aside to be explored if they do Dead Space 2? And the actors do great for the most part with what they were given, and you just really don't know if it just came down to the directing. Some dialogue is janky here and there, where the original just feels a bit more organic. With the most interesting dialogue given in the alternate ending, with an insight on potentially Isaac's new warped mentality, helping connect Dead Space 1 to Dead Space 2 just a little more smoothly, showing just how the marker's influence has really affected him, and if the reality of the first ending can even be trusted. And with that, EA Motive has fully captured the insanity and the haunting atmosphere of the original, elaborating on the evils within, creating an atmosphere that feels like the Ishimura is a deranged character itself. The diverse areas are rich with environmental storytelling, with the different sectors of the ship feeling lived in, with each taking on unique characteristics, like the crew quarters' apocalyptic aura containing cultist corpses that somehow make even candles look sinister, to the mining ship where flesh meets metal in an array of gruesome ways, with blood covering the rusted mining equipment and decaying bodies of the dead miners.
Disgusting!
with the Ishimura being probably the only ship in existence to make the event horizon look like Disneyland.
We're leaving.
With the nightmare on the Ishimura fully encapsulating cosmic horror. The marker causing incomprehensible horrors that transcends beyond human understanding to the poor souls on board, making you question every corner, every room on the ship. Making the Ishimura feel somehow simultaneously dead and alive, with scrolls of madness across the walls, the agonizing screams that you begin to realize might just all be in Isaac's head, with the real terror coming from the disturbed people under the marker's power, emphasizing the utter terror that the marker's influence can have on the human mind in all its glorious detail, from the soldier straight from Monty Python,
"'Tis but a scratch."
to the guy who looks like he invested his life savings in Dogecoin. Oh, and not to mention, down the vast corridors and expansive abyss lies the endless hordes of necromorphs stalking their prey and hiding in the vents. Like they all watch just a bit too much Die Hard. The infected crew return as disgusting as ever, looking like you put a human in a blender and told HR Geiger to put it back together.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
With basic necromorph slashers taking the brunt of Isaac's abuse, unique variants like the Dividers, Infectors, Leapers, and Lurkers return to really shake up the gameplay. And with Isaac's descent into madness, only fueled by his bloody rampages, only contrasted by his lonely ventures into the bleak, dark, and empty void of space, accompanied by that score that seems to be ripped straight from Alien, and that's perfectly okay. Pointing out that even when alone in the vacuum of space, these sections really hammer home that literally everyone and everything is really out to kill our poor Isaac. And just like any brilliant horror film or game, Dead Space true horror comes from the atmosphere around you. Moments of solitude, despair, letting your brain do the thinking of what could be making that noise or lurking around the corner, not just the jump scares. And just like in the original, when a necromorph tries to give you a friendly hug, there's still that stinger that sounds like an orchestra somehow simultaneously had a stroke. While the music composed for the remake, albeit almost identical, is perfectly married to the gameplay, aligning like a generator module to a centrifuge. Yay! Not to mention the unsung hero, the live system made by Motive, which is basically just a fancy way of saying, depending on Isaac's status, whether he's injured or scared, dictate his dialogue, heartbeat, and breathing. And when combined with the infamous diegetic HUD, you'll get one hell of an immersion into this nightmare. Now, you don't need me to tell you about the visual overhaul from the original. It is a fucking gorgeous game with stunning particle effects, haunting lighting, and improving virtually every other aspect with an insane amount of polish. And now even Isaac's suit in the vacuum of space will freeze over and then to only melt when re-entering the ship, and then to not only then dry off. I mean, fuck, look at this ship, boy. Not to mention the ungodly amount of blood and gore that covers our poor Isaac consistently, splattering across his suit and visor like some sort of fucked up modern art piece.
That I love. I absolutely love.
It just feels like Motive really went that extra mile with these details.
You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
And the one thing I really appreciate about the remake is keeping those memorable areas recognizable again, but in their own unique way, making the ship feel familiar enough to returning fans, but also building upon it to make it feel more connected. And speaking of recognizable, the most iconic part of the franchise has to be Isaac's suits. It just wouldn't be the same without them, with even casual players recognizing it. At first I wasn't too sure on the changes to the suits, but now after 3 playthroughs, these visual changes to the suit and rig make it feel more connected to the world. Now, the game's mechanics are again basically the same, but this time with a few major tweaks and additions, mostly all for the game's benefit. Well, mostly. EA Motive were in a tight spot where they were in a damned if they did, damned if they didn't situation. They had to carefully walk a tightrope of balancing additional features while straying not too far from the original, so it's safe to say they had some big shoes to fill. And in following Visceral's footsteps, for the most part they pulled it off, implementing that addictive gameplay loop that made the first one so engaging. And what makes the game so engaging to play is allowing players to have complete freedom of how they will engage in combat, giving agency to every encounter with the necromorphs. Choices and decisions players make in games are the crux of what makes a game fun. And with these choices, they're fed into the game's core gameplay loop. Every game in existence has a loop of players doing the same actions endlessly every few seconds, but a good game, like the remake, has a loop without players ever noticing they're repeating this cycle. An Ouroboros of fun, if you will. And the key components to this loop are to survive by scavenging precious resources, upgrading equipment, and ripping and tearing necromorphs by any means necessary.
Goddamn right.
And like in most survival horrors, you'll have to manage your resources, but here it's more of a pick up everything and anything that isn't tied down and sell it for profit at the store for supplies, but more importantly, upgrades. But I never found I was ever struggling to maintain inventory space or in desperate need of ammo or health, even on the higher difficulties. But that was me just searching every nook and cranny of the ship. And not only will you be picking up literally everything you see, you'll be throwing everything else right back at necromorphs with your handy kinesis module. Once a tool used by engineers to help move large objects, kinesis allows you to fling almost any object at your enemy, like some sort of fucked up Matilda. So if you are low on ammo or simply want to conserve it, conveniently placed poles are scattered around the Ishimura for just such an occasion. Or when you need to go guns blazing, the tools once used by the construction miners have now been repurposed for death, with all weapons returning from the original, including the plasma cutter, pulse rifle, ripper, line gun, and contact beam being great for dismembering necromorph limbs, with the flamethrower and force gun being extremely effective for crowd control. They all still feel extremely satisfying to carve through flesh and blood, all with the redesigned punchy sound effects, with some receiving complete makeovers. The plasma cutter returns as everyone's favorite utilitarian tool that is perfectly adapted to the situation, able to switch between horizontal and vertical as if designed by the creators to purposely cut off people's limbs, making it somehow the most versatile and powerful weapon in the game, with notable overhauls of certain weapons like the force gun, an energy weapon that blasts a huge amount of energy similar to the force of a shotgun that would only make Bruce Campbell blush.
Groovy.
Oh yeah, and with the new peeling system, now the force gun doesn't just knock them on their ass but literally shreds the flesh off their bone. And if you thought the necromorphs couldn't look any worse, just imagine them covered in blood and missing all their skin. Yeah, only a face a mother could love. Now able to see in real time the damage afflicted upon their little meat suits. It's disgusting, and I love it.
Jesus Christ.
So now combine kinesis, stasis, effective weapons, not to mention Isaac's addiction to stomping dead corpses for loot, and now you've got a recipe for gameplay that is
digital heroin.
But alas, all is not perfect aboard the Ishimura. A few minor complaints here and there for the game that could be patched later as quality of life improvements. The new clearance system is a great addition, but occasionally would still be marked red even when I had max clearance, which just led me to mashing the open button at every locker anyway. The low gravity sections are still a bit disorientating, where in some areas you literally have no fucking clue where you're going even with a guide. And after a certain point, the weapons become just a bit too powerful. I mean, in the beginning, necromorphs can really pose a threat, but only a few hours later, even a horde just becomes just another problem for you to fix. Now, the big question. Is it scary? After all these years, that's a loaded question. It's obviously subjective to the person whether or not this type of game makes them shit themselves. Well, if you've never played the original, you might want to wear a diaper. But if you remotely remember playing the first one, or even played it recently, I think Motive may have leaned a bit too heavily on the original for influences and set pieces. As many Dead Space veterans will know, if they see an untouched necromorph lying untouched, you know something ain't right.
Say, hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right.
And of course it's placed suspiciously right next to the door you need to go through. It's as suspicious as seeing your stepsister stuck in the washing machine.
What are you doing,
step bro.
And I don't know if it's the intensity director or just placement of enemies. Each playthrough seems to have the same enemy spawn, occasionally randomly throwing in some new enemies. And because the game is a retelling, they could have implemented plenty of bait and switches. Old fans would be scared and new fans would be none the wiser. Now, these are just a few small gripes I had with the game, because other than that, I absolutely adored what Motive was able to achieve. It was an absolute joy to return to the game that made me fall in love with not just gaming, but horror in general. Motive only implemented smart, constructive changes, keeping die-hard fans happy while introducing new ones, and most of all, just keeping the game fun. With many remakes today plaguing the industry, it's just blatant sad cash grabs. Like, most remakes today are just a McDonald's cheeseburger. You've had it before, you know what you're getting, and you're gonna be sad that you bought it, because even though it's cheap, you always think it'll be as good as the first time you had it, leaving you feeling more empty than you were before. Whereas the Dead Space remake is more like a ribeye steak from a nice restaurant. Sure, it may be a little overpriced and may take 15 years to arrive, but boy, when it does, it's full of flavor and brimming with soul, leaving you more than satisfied. And EA Motive seemed to perfectly capture the essence of what Callisto Protocol tried to do, even with all their good intentions, but that's a video for another day.
Bruh.
And even though Dead Space is a game about a man looking for his dead girlfriend aboard a ship full of monsters even Lovecraft can't describe, it's a beautiful love letter to not only the original and the creators, but to horror and science fiction as a whole, with gameplay that will truly stand the test of time. And if EA plans on giving the franchise the Resident Evil remake treatment, with Motive at the helm, we're in good hands. So thank you, EA Motive, from the bottom of my heart, for not fucking this up. Yours sincerely. Thank you all for watching. Like and subscribe if you want. If not, that's cool. See you later. Peace.